All in Sports Network. We love sports.
Today is Wednesday, April 23rd, and this is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson. We have a great show for the people today. We have recurring guest, Dr. Jake, in the house, and so it'll be a 2-on-1 Jake versus Tanner episode again. If those who go way back with us, we had Dr. Solis on with us following the Quinn Ewers injury, and he was actually our very first guest on the podcast. And so now officially a recurring guest and second time joining the show today. He'll jump on a little bit later, but Jake, some big Texas transfer news. Syracuse defensive tackle. We had kind of maybe, a little bit of Nostradamus predicted this a little bit, or at least to kind of keep your ears and eyes peeled for it. But Murad Watson officially commits to Texas today at that defensive tackle position that seems to be a very high target for this coaching staff in this Texas program.
Yeah, this is, I believe, the fifth defensive tackle transfer of if you combine the fall and the spring portal. But this is probably the biggest get. I would say this is the most talented defensive tackle they brought in from the transfer portal. I expect him to start right away. He was a freshman All-American at Syracuse, was kind of an overlooked recruit, and just wanted to make that jump to SEC play and, at a top program. Sure, NIL plays in with that as well. But this is a really big get because this guy is very fun to watch on film. I'd say he's the best, and I haven't watched a ton yet, but I watched a little when I had some time today, and he's a little more disruptive, I would say. Not so much just space. He's a space eater, but he can also penetrate and get into the backfield. I wouldn't be surprised to see his sacks go up. He actually had a good amount of pressures last year. There's only one sack, but again, that sack number isn't something I think you really key in on for a defensive tackle. But yeah, he had Cam Ward running all over the place during that game. That's the game. That's one of the fun games to watch him. He played his best against better competition. He got more and more snaps as the year went on. And like I said, I think he'll start right away for Texas.
Yeah, I watched an early game of the season. I watched his game against Stanford. Also a good opportunity there to watch Emmett Mosley, the wide receiver transfer. So a little 2-for-1 action there, but got to at least put my eyes on him a little bit. And like you said, that's still very early on in the season. I think later on into the season is where you probably get to see his maturity and his development as a player kind of take place throughout his freshman year. And so, but yeah, looking forward to him joining the ranks. Like you said, Jake, he's probably more of a disruptor in terms of the pass rushing game, whereas you've already filled spots with the run stoppers, and you've already kind of got the big uglies down there to clog up holes and rushing lanes, passing lanes for your linebackers to break free. Well, I think with Watson, he's probably a different caliber of skill set when it comes to the defensive tackle position, where he's actually probably going to be more so in on pass rushing downs within that rotation to maybe put some pressure on the quarterback. From what I saw, he gets a hell of a push in the middle of that pocket and forces the quarterback to escape outside the pocket. And I think interior pass rush is something that Texas, quite frankly, lacked against, a Will Howard against Ohio State or something along those lines. And so really looking forward to seeing what he contributes to this defensive line.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed a trend with Texas in the portal this year. They've gotten a lot of guys who have multiple years of eligibility left and are probably going to be at Texas for more than 1 year. And all guys that have already kind of proven themselves on the field to at least some extent as well, which is really impressive because those are the hardest guys to get. But Texas has gone out and got them, and I would venture to say this is up there with Jack Andrews or Andres, or how do you say it?
Jack Andres,
as a biggest get in the portal, because he will start and he will play a lot of meaningful snaps for Texas. And now I feel like that defensive tackle room is kind of solidified.
Now, Jake, do you think, and I've this is just stupid Texas fans talking, but which there are plenty of, does this affect Justice Terry at all in terms of him maybe wanting to transfer, or him, not being satisfied with, the amount of guys that they're getting in at his position? Or do you think that was a conversation had within recruiting him of like, look, you're one of like 3 guys on the roster. We're going to have to go out and get guys. Don't panic. You'll get your reps.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think this would come as a shock to him. And quite frankly, he's going to have a chance to beat several of these guys out. Maybe not this most recent one, but he's going to have a chance to beat out some of the other guys. I mean, Hero Canoe, that's a guy that I'm hoping Justice Terry can beat out, even though I do hope Hero Canoe turns into a really solid player. Justice Terry, I want to be a dominant first round pick type player. But also, you can't rely on a freshman to carry the load, especially at the defensive tackle position. I would argue, and we can talk to Dr. Solis about this, who has some experience at defensive tackle. I would argue defensive tackle might be the hardest position to transition from high school to college, and especially SEC play, where the size, the speed, the strength, everything just amplifies times 20 compared to what you were in high school.
Yeah. Also, Texas and Texas State taking the mound right now. Currently, the score, I believe, last time I checked was 5-4, unless something has changed in the top of the 6th. And so we'll be kind of keeping an eye on that as time of recording. If that game wraps up by the time this episode ends, we'll give a little bit of a recap at the end of this episode. But again, that might be time for tomorrow's episode. But just kind of wanted to give everybody a heads up on kind of what the scheduling is going to look like.
It is 9-4 Texas State now.
They must have just hit a big shot.
Texas can not beat Texas State in baseball. I don't know what the deal is.
That is a weird.
They're not even good this year.
Yeah, but that's a weird speed bump for Texas to have, because this is the second meeting against this Texas State team, and looking like the second loss.
Yeah, I mean, still time to come back, but they just, man, Texas State in baseball over the last few years has dominated Texas. Now, in the previous years, Texas State has had good teams. This year's team has a losing record. Right,
and maybe it has something to do with injuries, which is something we will talk to Dr. Jake about coming up here in just a moment. So a lot of foreshadowing of what these conversations are going to look like with our guests coming on the show. And let's just not even waste any more time. Man of the hour. Joining the show today, Dr. Jake Solis. We appreciate his time. We know he is on call, actually, to be in the OR at any given moment. And so we appreciate him, taking time out of his very busy schedule to join us today. Dr. Jake, we appreciate you. Thanks for being on.
Hey, guys. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me back.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, well, we promised you after the first interview, we said, hey, we'd love to have you back on. And here it is. So I don't know where you want to start either, Jake, but I'm talking co-host Jake. We can go straight into, how we thought the end of football season kind of, with Ohio State and that run through the playoffs and Arizona State and all the excitement there, kind of what your thoughts are, Jake, on the football season, going into the transfer portal and just NIL in general in terms of what the college football landscape looks like today compared to when you played. But also we do want to get into some baseball injuries and maybe kind of compare what those baseball injuries are like compared to football injuries or any other type of athletic injury in terms of just the wear and tear on the body and the recovery time, because some Texas players right now dealing with it a little bit. So Jake, I'll let you take the floor, man. Wherever you want to start the conversation, we'll just let you go.
Yeah, I think we rewind back in time a little bit. We kind of previewed the season with you last time, and obviously it ended up being, I think we would agree, a very good season. You fall short of maybe that great line by not getting to the championship game. But what was kind of your end thoughts on the season, kind of compared to the expectations we kind of talked about the first time?
No, I think it was a great season. Obviously every year you want to win the championship at Texas, but it's just the fact that every year we've made so much improvement under Sarkisian, and you can see the talent across the board now. It's just not, one or two positions in offense or defense that are carrying the team, but really an improvement, overall. It seems like we continue to improve. We lost prior to last season, we lost so much talent to the NFL, and we're losing it again, but it seems like we're reloading everywhere. So I'm excited to see what the season holds. I think everyone's excited about Arch Manning, but I think the defense is going to have some real superstars on it. So that'll be exciting as well.
No, I totally agree. And, you obviously heard some of the conversation that we were having at the defensive tackle position and kind of the amount of players that you're losing on the defensive line. Maybe not so much edge, but with really in that interior. But a lot of work being done in the recruiting ranks, a lot of work being done in the transfer portal. What does the cohesiveness look like within that group of playing together, knowing each other's tendencies, the rotation, and things of that sort? How important is it at that position?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that's kind of my I wouldn't say concerns, but one of the things that maybe I'm not as familiar with, comparing. This makes me sound old, but how it was back in my day to now, I think you guys were mentioning, you follow more than me, but that, there were 3 defensive tackles left over, or on the squad that didn't transfer in. And we got 4 or 5 guys that came in on the team.
Yeah, five guys.
5 on the transfer portal, but that's not even counting on the recruitment trail either.
Yeah, three from recruiting and 5 through the transfer.
So, I mean, you're looking at, a team meeting room that's completely different, this season compared to last season, a lot of turnover because there is guys get really close, getting recruited out of high school and, redshirting and such, through the freshman season onward, you get to know everyone really well. And there is a tremendous amount of cohesiveness. You're playing alongside guys, practicing alongside guys and going to meetings with guys who are, extremely close to you, like brothers. And so I think that one of the important things of, spring and these guys who are just coming in, summer workouts and summer ball is developing that, because especially at a position like defensive line, is, you're not out on an island, maybe like some of the, defensive backs and receivers are, you're in there in the trenches with everyone. And so cohesiveness is extremely important amongst everyone. And also just, playing time and rotation as well too, respecting other guys' playing time and respecting that you're not always going to be the guy out there is a huge deal. And so I think it certainly helps when everyone, you're all friends, you're all close, you all feel like brothers. And so that's something that hopefully this position group especially can develop, throughout all those grueling summer workouts and as a summer camp starts.
Yeah, and kind of my last question for football, I kind of mentioned it earlier in the show, but I think defensive tackle might be the hardest position to transition from high school to college. And I was curious, kind of your thoughts with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree, but I'm biased. A lot of other positions would say otherwise. I mean, I think at a high school, the issue is, playing against high school offensive linemen versus playing against college offensive linemen makes it a different kind of game. I mean, unless you're playing at the highest, 6A Duncanville type level, practically for everyone else, which is the large majority of players and even, D1 talent, say you're, a 6'5", 300-pound defensive tackle, and, in high school, the guys you're going up against oftentimes are, 5'9", 5'10", 200-pound guys. And so, yes, you can be dominant, but it doesn't really help your game as much. They're smaller than you. They're usually trying to cut block you. You're coming out of your stance as quick as you can. And I remember when I was in high school, essentially the technique I was used to was, getting that good first step and throwing my hands to the ground because that's where the offensive linemen were going, And so there was getting to college, just learning even basics like just, how to get under a guy's pads and fit on him, fit on offensive lineman's shoulders. Was almost a new concept to me because that just wasn't part of the high school game because you're not playing against guys your size, you're playing against guys half your size. And then everything else, I think that's what makes it, more difficult for defensive tackle. I think everything else is probably similar to other positions where, you're playing against guys who are faster, who are quicker, who are stronger. But I think maybe that technique and having to kind of relearn some basics make defensive tackle a little more challenging.
Yeah, you're not going up against Johnny who's preparing for his Algebra 2 test, the following Monday. I mean, it's just a completely different, just like you said, size, everything in terms of just the intensity, and there's a big difference between offensive line at any high school level, and then going into Division I football, regardless if you're Justice Terry or whoever you are. So I guess my question to you, and I don't think we touched too much on it last time you were on with us, but with the NIL and the transfer portal, do you find it just a little absurd? Is it getting a little out of hand?
I think everyone does.
Yeah.
I don't flip out about it because I figure maybe I'm an optimist. I feel like something has to give and there has to be some regulation at some point because it is out of hand. So I'm just kind of waiting around for that. But I think most people agree. I think, and now that's not to say I think it's necessarily all a bad thing. I think transfer rules before were not fair. And the fact that athletes before could not benefit at all from their name, image, or likeness was not fair. And I think most people would agree with that. But yeah, there have to be some regulations to it. And again, I'm a bit of an optimist and not freaking out about it, but I feel like that's something probably here over the next 2 or 3 years, should be and will be addressed.
Yeah. I originally thought when, NIL, it was a story I've told before on the podcast, which was just always heard a story about like there was a track athlete that made a water bottle company or something like that. And they basically got told by the NCAA, you either get rid of the company or you stop running track. Yeah. And because you're using your name, image, and likeness, always kind of thought it was that. And I'm fine with paying players, but it's turned into free agency to the max.
And I think that's unfortunate, especially, you already look at guys who are going to the NFL who are, 21, 22, 23 years old, probably getting taken advantage of by agents, and whatnot. And then that's just amplified now when you have, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds who are even more immature, and not bad kids. I don't mean that, just more immature, naturally. And I feel like a lot probably are being taken advantage of and missing out on opportunities, with kind of both that combined NIL and the ability to transfer anywhere they want to go. I mean, there is something to be said for, the players who stick with their program and develop, over years and become strong players, in their 3rd through 5th years. And I think some guys are probably missing out on that opportunity by transferring to multiple schools, trying to find a quick opportunity. So,
yeah, one thing that I've always kind of, because I like to try to play, if I was commissioner of the NCAA, what rule would I come up with to regulate this a little bit? And one, this is not my original idea, but it is an idea that I do agree with. Maybe you start off with kind of a cap your freshman year, and then that sophomore year it goes up a little bit. Junior year it goes up a little bit. Senior year it's maxed out as high as it can go in terms of what you can benefit from on your name, image, likeness. But if you transfer, it goes right back down to that freshman cap, regardless if you're a junior or a senior. And so it maybe incentivizes you a little bit to stay put for a little bit longer. Maybe you play, maybe you're a grad transfer. Then you don't, then you can transfer out. It doesn't really matter all that much. But I don't know. Maybe there's an idea, and maybe you've thought of something.
Oh, that's way above my pay grade. I think that's reasonable. I think transferring. I think kids should be given the opportunity for essentially a free transfer. That if where they're at isn't what they expected it to be, and what they're promised in recruiting or whatever, that they can transfer to another school.
Coach leaves,
no issues. But then after that, I think there should be stipulations. I think the idea of a kid every season transferring to new school is getting a bit absurd.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I think maybe some, like you were saying, in a way, creating caps or like tiered caps on NIL, and probably caps on what exactly schools are. Is what they call the school collectives and stuff like that can do directly, and in terms of recruiting. I think that probably needs to be regulated a good amount.
Yeah. So I get we'll switch gears now, kind of to the baseball side of things, and because Texas has been dealing with multiple injuries, and I know you probably don't know the specifics with those guys, but in general, Quinn Ewers kind of had a little bit of a baseball injury this year. And so we talked about that a little bit, but kind of in general, what I know baseball injuries are supposedly, or at least that's what us peasants here on the ground that aren't doctors, that baseball injuries differ a lot from like football injuries, even from basketball injuries. And what kind of is the reason for that? And what, I guess, what differences are there?
So technically, you can get any injury in any sport, but yes, in baseball, the prevalence of shoulder and elbow injuries are much, much higher than other sports. And a lot of that, comes down to the throwing motion and repetitive throwing. College and professional baseball, it is absolutely incredible how fast these guys can throw, how accurate they can throw. The human body is not meant to throw the way that baseball, especially pitchers, the way that they throw. We are not designed that way. You talk to any orthopedic sports medicine specialist, they will tell you that. And yet these guys are, such incredible athletes, and they've trained their body over years that they're able to do this. But of course, that puts them at higher likelihood for certain injuries. So just like you were saying with baseball, you get shoulder and elbow injuries much more common than in other sports. Obviously, you still see things like that in football. It's just not nearly as common. So say when you look at the shoulder, most common injuries in the shoulder with a baseball player would be something like a superior labral tear or a slap tear. SLAP stands for superior labrum anterior to posterior. I think that's the dumbest acronym in orthopedics, but that's what we go with. So a slap tear in the shoulder. So the labrum, the top part of the labrum in the shoulder is this little cartilage ring, almost like a gasket on the cup part of the shoulder, the glenoid. The long head of your biceps tendon inserts onto the top part of the labrum. And so when you engage your biceps, you pull at that area, and normally that's fine. But with baseball players, they're doing so much rotation, particularly external rotation through their arms. So when they're winding up for a pitch and they're coming back, when you twist through that shoulder, you're twisting at that biceps tendon and you're pulling at that labrum. So a lot of repeated external rotation and extreme external rotation can start to tear at that labrum. And so you do see slap tears, commonly, and particularly pitchers. Less common rotator cuff injuries. That tends to be kind of older population. But again, even in pitchers, because they're doing a lot of unnatural things with their shoulder, you see rotator cuff injury. Then elbow, obviously there's multiple elbow injuries, but the big one is tears and attenuation of the UCL, or the ulnar collateral ligament. So that's what Tommy John surgery is famous for. That's reconstruction of the UCL. So the ulnar collateral ligament is the one on the inside part of the elbow right here. And so again, as baseball pitchers externally rotate, they're twisting their arm back, and they're putting a lot of tension through that UCL. There's two ways that they injure that. One is a rupture. In other words, at one time during one event, it snaps. The other is what's called attenuation or stretching of it, meaning after thousands upon thousands of throws, that ligament actually starts to lengthen, starts to weaken. And so they start to get pain in that area, and their pitching velocity rapidly worsens. And so you'll see, plenty of pitchers, especially as you get into the more elite levels, with Tommy John surgery, reconstruction of that ligament, either because it's stretched too much or at some point they ruptured it. Again, you can see any of these injuries in any sports, but far more likely to see them in baseball players than other sports.
And does that go to the recovery time of these injuries? It always feels like as a naive kid, I always gave my baseball friends a lot of crap because I was like, yeah, you're going to get, Bob Sanders coming over the middle and he's going to destroy you coming from the safety position. And yet you get a guy with a concussion, he's back the next week. In football, they're just much tougher, obviously. And then baseball guys, it feels like they trip over first base and then they're out for 2 months. And you're like, what is happening here? So in terms of the severity of the injuries, are those just more severe, lengthy injuries to recover because they're within the ligaments, or is it just baseball players play so much more games and so they need more rest?
I think it's some of both, but mind you, put things into perspective. So like, ACL injuries, which are far more common in football, average return to sport after ACL reconstruction is between 9 and 12 months. And so that's also another one that would be similar to, say, these baseball injuries. It's kind of like what you're saying. It's a few different factors. One is the surgery itself and healing up from that. So say like an ulnar collateral ligament reconstruction, right? Yes, you can give them a new ligament, but that actually has to heal. And so you need a healing time where that ligament actually heals down into bone and your body starts to lay some of its own collagen around that ligament and strengthening it. And even the surrounding tissue that, gets damaged, because surgery is controlled trauma. So the surrounding tissue that gets damaged has to heal as well too. So there's a healing period. And for most soft tissue, it varies, but in general, you're looking at a few months of healing, 3, 4, up to 6 months, healing for that alone. But the issue with, again, these elite athletes is that it's not just about the healing of the tissue, but them getting back to what they were able to do before, which was already incredible. And you take someone with an elite skill and you keep them out of it for a long time, especially an elite physical skill. You keep them out of it for months, they're going to get weak, and they are going to lose a lot of their ability. So, for example, with our baseball pitchers, and I cover the college here, Angelo State and San Angelo, several of the sports, but for our throwing athletes, there's that time period of just healing from surgery between 3 and 6 months. And then we get them into things like progressive throwing programs with our athletic trainers and physical therapists before they can safely get back to throwing. And oftentimes that can take several months as well too. So then you're looking at, a kid rehabbing a, elbow or rehabbing a shoulder, maybe not getting back to throwing, for 6 months, 9 months, a year. And then even when they get back to throwing, probably not being at the level that they were before. So, and that's when you start hearing stories about, this guy was a great pitcher, but, it took him 2 years, it took him 3 years to get back to where he was, or not at all in some cases, unfortunately.
So I have a stupid question. So when it's like with Tommy John's and you're reconstructing a tendon or whatever that is, what is it? Something artificial you're putting in? Are you taking something from somewhere else? How does that work?
Yes, that's a good question. There's all sorts of that. Depends on the surgery and what you're using. This is what's called autograft and allograft. Autograft means that it's a graft taken from your own body. Allograft means that it's a donor graft. Rarely are we using purely artificial grafts, though sometimes, especially with allografts, so donor grafts, we will use some synthetic substance in addition to the graft to enhance it. Like what's called a suture tape, we may put along the graft to make it a little bit stronger, things like that. So there's options, say for like when you're doing a Tommy John surgery. There's a ligament called a tendon in the front of the forearm called the palmaris that's functionally not that important, that you can harvest that. So you can harvest it from your own forearm and double it over and use that as a graft. There's other tendons within your own body, you can use that as well too, or you can use a donor. Typically in young healthy athletes, tendon from your own body is going to be stronger and hold up better. So for most surgeries, for most reconstructions, yes, you'll use your own tissue often, especially for athletes. You will. And that one good point you brought up too was just the use of the word reconstruction, just so that like when your listeners hear about people talking about different kind of surgeries, the way us surgeons talk, when we use the word reconstruction, that means, like you're saying, you're using a graft, you're creating a new ligament in that case. When we say repair, what it sounds like means we're taking that ligament that usually tore off bone or avulsed off bone and repairing it back down to the bone. So that's why with ACLs, there is such thing as an ACL repair, but that's kind of in its infancy right now. But for 99.5% of especially elite level athletes, they're getting reconstructions of their ACL or a new ACL put in.
Have you ever watched that movie Rookie of the Year back in like the late 90s?
I remember. I was a kid. I remember that coming out when I was a kid.
Yeah, his elbow was so tight and stretched back that it is that possible? Is that movie have any reference to it?
I've never seen that personally. I'd like to think that somewhere in this world it has or will happen one day, because I have fond memories of that movie from my childhood.
As a child, I always thought there was hope. I was like, maybe I should mess up my elbow enough to where it gets just so tight where it's like a rubber band and it just snaps.
Yeah, I've yet to see that in practice or hear of it reported in the literature. So.
Jake, you got anything else?
No, that was probably the question I was most excited to ask, just because I've never understood what that means, and I'm not smart enough to Google it and understand what the heck some doctor research paper is telling me.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it, but
yeah. Well, Dr. Jake, we appreciate having you on, man. We know you're on call. We don't want to take up too much of your time tonight. You also were warning us of a storm that might be blowing through here pretty soon, so we'll get you off. But yeah, we're about at our time anyway. So just want to thank you again for coming on, and hey, we'll make it a biannual thing where right at the beginning of football season we'll probably get you on again, and we can discuss some Texas football before the season gets going.
Yeah, happy to talk to you guys. Thank you again.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that is Dr. Jake Solis, and a former Texas Longhorn and a former national champion at that as well, on that historic 2005 team. So
he's got like the Tiger Woods. Whenever he's teeing up, you got to be like former Texas Longhorn football player, national champion, doctor, PhD, orthopedic surgeon. You got to go down the list with him.
Yeah, and then he's just like, okay, enough's enough. Thank you guys. Yeah. Well, Jake, yeah, we'll kind of get into the Texas baseball game. What's it looking like at this moment in time? Jake? I don't have the
Texas
score up.
got I believe, a 3-run bomb, and it is now a 1-point game, so 9-8.
Oh, so that is not updated quite yet. So, all right, on at least on my score. That's why I wanted
What do you have?
I've got 5-9, top of the 7th.
Oh yeah, that's it. It should be 9-8. They got a 3-run bomb, 9-8 in the 7th.
All right. Well, that game is probably not going to end by the time that you and I are done with this episode. So, what we will probably do is we will watch the remainder of this game. We'll start recording for Thursday's episode, which will preview the Texas A&M series in baseball and then the Oklahoma series in softball. We'll preview those two series, get that episode for you out on Thursday. And then on Thursday or Friday's episode, we will watch the NFL draft and we will have our reaction episode to the NFL draft. Where is Kelvin Banks going to land? Where is Jahdae Barron going to land? Where is Matthew Golden going to land? Is Quinn Ewers going to sneak into the first round? And like Coach John Gruden. Jake, did you watch the Gruden camp, the QB camp?
I have not yet. I'm going to watch it when we finish recording tonight.
All right, cool.
The Stars
Yeah.
game ended way too late for me to
Yeah,
watch
we
it.
stayed up pretty late watching the Stars game. So, but yeah, the Gruden QB camp with Quinn Ewers, phenomenal, as advertised, and he talks. I just love the way Quinn Ewers goes into depth about Sarkisian's offense and really the responsibilities between quarterback and wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, whoever the ball receiver is, and that one of his best lines in the entire episode was, well, he's not a robot. We don't run drawings at the University of Texas. So just because one route's supposed to go one way, you got to kind of adjust according to what the defense is giving you and just find the open space. And he was talking about that touchdown pass in the I think it was the Michigan game to Gunnar Helm. So, all right. Well, that is going to do it for today's episode. Again, thank you, Dr. Jake Solis, for joining the show. Again, Murad Watson has committed to the University of Texas. I believe Texas is probably good at defensive line. I would think at this moment in time. That doesn't mean they're not going to add another position. The portal is still alive and well, but I know they want to get their team situated, ready to go for the remainder of spring and summer ball and get these guys working cohesively as one collective unit. For Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We release these episodes 5 days a week, each day, Monday through Friday at noon. And so go ahead, set your timer. Again, like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word. This has been your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.